I really appreciate you saying that. I feel like I was always so resistant to change. Again, I was the good girl and I just did what I was supposed to do and did it fairly well. Um, but it wasn't until I started taking these risks and making changes and not being resistant to change that things in my life just started exploding and changing for the better. And realizing that, you can burn things down, but you have to do it the right way. And then you can build them back up even better.
Welcome to another episode of It's Settled, the Amitros podcast, where you'll hear authentic stories of overcoming adversity after a life-changing injury and how injury survivors, members, and industry experts are making a difference. I'm Andrea Mills, Chief Client Officer at Amitros.
And I'm John Kane, Senior Vice President of Strategy. If today's episode inspires you, please subscribe and leave a review to help inspire more listeners facing similar situations. Now, it's settled. Let's get on to the episode and explore the human side of workers' comp and insurance claims.
So we're so excited today to have Joanna Wynes with Sage Settlement Consulting. She is a settlement planner, and she's also the president of the American Association of Settlement Consultants. So Joanna, welcome. We're so excited.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's great to see you both.
Awesome. Well, we love to start off every podcast at Amitros. We love to talk about professional administration, but we also love to know how people got started in the industry. So do you mind spending a couple minutes and telling us how you got started in this industry?
Absolutely. So I went to law school and I practiced law. I did medical malpractice and products liability and other types of catastrophic liability cases up in Philadelphia. I practiced there for about 8 years at some really awesome firms, and we had a lot of settlement consulting involved in our cases because of the size and magnitude of them. So I always thought that was really interesting, but I never, for some reason, I just did not love being a lawyer at all. I got really quickly burned out. I had amazing mentors, and they really wanted me to be, one of the next big trial lawyers, and there was just something in me saying, I don't want to do this. My dad and my brother were always in sales. They were always very successful in sales. And there was something inside of me that always had a little bit of curiosity or, I don't know. I had a drive to get into sales, I think, at some point, but I was also very fearful of it because it was just totally new. And I was just such a by the book kid. I went to school, I got my straight A's. I went to college, I got my straight A's. I went to law school, I graduated top of my class, became a lawyer, and did all that. And then I felt like I needed to kind of go rogue so that I could be happy. And in 2014, I moved to Maryland from Pennsylvania. And at that time, I sort of figured this is the time to either make a change in my career or keep doing what I don't love for the next 30 years. And I'm like, I just can't do that. So I got a job. I was trying to figure out how to transition out of law, and I sent out a ton of resumes for a bunch of different sales jobs. I was looking into medical sales at first because my then partner was in the medical field. So I thought maybe it would be a good fit. And I knew a lot about that kind of stuff just from being in medical malpractice, but I couldn't really get anything. People are like, you have no transferable skills. So I ended up getting a job at an MSA company where we drafted MSAs, and in-house they structured MSAs in-house. And so I was an allocator, which was not a great fit for my personality. Very much an introverted job, and I'm not an introvert, but I was there. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the workers' compensation field. I learned a lot about settlements, Medicare, set-asides, professional administration, funding. And so while I was there for about a year, just kind of in transition, I started thinking, well, now I have this really cool Medicare experience, and I have my legal experience, and maybe I should sell something in the legal field. And maybe structured settlements are just the thing. So I called I called my settlement consultant who I had worked with in Philadelphia on a lot of my cases and told him that I wanted to be a settlement consultant. And he's like, where did this come from? And I said, I don't know. It just looked really cool. I always saw you going around and meeting new attorneys and going to mediations and getting involved in the exciting parts of the case and really helping our clients and kind of showing what their future would look like after we worked hard to get them the money. And I think I want to do this. So I sort of, thought I was maybe a little crazy from going from a salary job to zero clients, zero contacts, zero anything. But I decided that it was something that I really wanted to do. And that the settlement consultant called a lot of my old colleagues from the law firm and said, she called me. She wants to do this. What do you think? And everyone's like, if Joanna Wynes wants to do something, she will do it. So give her a chance. And so I started in 2016 with zero clients. Last year, I worked with about 250 attorneys in the Mid-Atlantic region. So
That's awesome.
That's sort of my overview.
No, I think that's awesome. I think it also lends a lot of credibility to the role, having that attorney background and that you have been, a practicing attorney in the space, and especially with medical malpractice. I'm sure that brings a lot of comfort to the clients and the attorneys that you're working with, because you know the ropes and you've seen a lot of things and you can bring a lot of expertise to it. I do love the fact that, you as a woman who, as you mentioned, got straight A's and kind of were on one path, decided to take a pivot. And I think that's really, really brave of you. And I think a lot of women maybe, wouldn't be able to do that, or maybe wouldn't think to navigate a different path. So I just think that's really, really cool and brave of you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you saying that. I feel like I was always so resistant to change. Again, I was the good girl and I just did what I was supposed to do and did it fairly well. But it wasn't until I started taking these risks and making changes and not being resistant to change that things in my life just started exploding and changing for the better. And realizing that, you can burn things down, but you have to do it the right way. And then you can build them back up even better. And I'm part of this in Maryland. I'm part of this beautiful women's caucus of trial lawyers, and we all serve to inspire each other. And a few women have been inspired now to, leave their firms that they were with for a long time and start their own firms, or come up with, new job positions for themselves that are better for themselves and their family. And it's just cool to see it happening. It's cool to be involved in it and be part of the process and inspire others and have others continuously inspire me as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned that you reached out to a structured settlement broker that you had previously worked with. Have there been other mentors, kind of either in this space or kind of, attorneys that really have nothing to do with structured settlement brokers that have helped you before or through this process that you leaned on?
Absolutely. So, like I said, when I was transitioning and I was nervous, I had my mentor, and I did call my old colleagues who are medical malpractice and product liability attorneys, and, just got their input, and they were super encouraging and told me to stay confident, keep my head up. I called, there were a few women at the time. There were not very many women in the industry, I don't think, when I started in 2016. And there are more now. There's still not a ton, I don't think, in the settlement consulting roles, but there were a few, there were a few women, female consultants who had been with Sage and their predecessor companies, Settlement Alliance, James Street Group. And I started calling on some of them when I first started to see what worked for them, to see things that they felt were, critical with their marketing. One of the consultants at Sage, she invited a few of us women to her home in California. This was right when I was starting, and she did like a 2 or 3 day crash course on settlement consulting, which was super helpful. So I would call on people, and they would give me, whatever information they were willing to give me. And I started forming partnerships with companies like Amitros and a lot of the trust companies. I've done a ton of business with Legacy Enhancement Trust, Pooled Trust Space, and started calling on our partners and learning as much as I possibly could about everything settlement related. And I would say, as far as attorneys, like I said, I had my old colleagues in Philadelphia. When I moved to Maryland, it was hard. I didn't really have too much of a network, but I think, around year 3 or 4, things started to really compound and start going in the right direction. And now I have a ton of attorneys who I work with, obviously, and a ton of people I can ask feedback from and testimonials. And, if I'm like, do you like this about my business, or is there something you think I should change? It's really nice to have people who I know I can ask those questions to and get honest feedback.
Yeah, what would you say is like 1 or 2 things that you would say to either your younger self or someone who's, an attorney right now that maybe is looking to do something else, or maybe you're an adjuster right now and you want to do something else? Like what would be some advice you would give to someone who maybe wants to start their own business or take a career change?
I would say that you have to really, I think, have a clear vision of what you want. What is your goal? What is the end goal? And how are you going to get there? And I know that sounds simple, or I guess it's complicated, but I think having the clarity of the vision and what you want to achieve is what is going to help you get where you need to get. I think that, before you make those moves, also starting to build your network, thinking about who your target is, who are you going to market to, who are your customers, and make connections with as many people as you can. Build your reputation as great as you can so that when you hit the ground running, you have support. And I think, you need support of friends who are in your business and outside your business, and really in all domains. You need to be surrounded by good people. I think that when I started in sales, I did underestimate, I think, the mental toll and the emotional toll that it would take to get started. I knew I had the skills as far as relating to people, or, figuring things out, learning new things. But I don't know that I had the patience. That was a skill that I really had to develop. Waiting to get my first case, waiting to get meetings. And so I think that anything that people can do to sort of esteem themselves and make sure that they are at top mental health, and working with trusted friends and advisors at the time they go into it is the best way to really hit the ground running, because you need to be grounded, you need to be ready, you need to be confident so that you can roll with the punches that owning a business or transitioning brings. And then I think once you are able to endure some of those storms once or twice and do it with grace and have it work out, then it gives you confidence moving forward in your life to make other changes when things aren't working out exactly how you want them to do too.
Yeah, I think it's so great that you just mentioned the network thing too. I think it's so important to have a strong network. And if you're a young person just starting out, maybe it's just reaching out to people you went to high school with or college with and say, hey, I'm starting this, or I want to try that, or do you have any experience with this? Or maybe your uncle's brother's cousin does, and you can help make an introduction. I just think it's so important, because I've seen so many people in their careers just really kind of stay kind of what's comfortable and not branch out, and then find themselves in a place where they need to start building a network. And it's hard to do when you're 35, 40. You got to start much younger. And it could be, I like what you mentioned too, like it could be anyone in the facet of your life, because if you're starting a new business, like you need someone to help you with marketing, you need someone to help you with website design, like all of the facets of a business. So I love that you mentioned that. So, and then I'd love to hear a little bit too about kind of how you're navigating your career while balancing like other life roles, as a working mom. I think it's really interesting and fun to talk to other working moms and see, how all that works.
Well, thank you I love that question. So, I do have a lot of roles. Like you said, I have a pretty high volume business, president of the American Association of Settlement Consultants. And yes, I have two little kids. I have a 7-year-old. My 7-year-old does have special needs. I have a 4.5-year-old little girl who loves attention and wants to play Barbies with me all day, every day, which I can't always do, but I do my best. And like I said, I have a lot of friends, which is wonderful, a good social life and all that. And I would say what I do is, as far as my kids, if I see something, if I see an opportunity maybe at their school where I can go volunteer or be on a field trip or surprise them or something like that, and I look at my calendar and I don't have a mediation or a big marketing event or something like that, then I block that off. I block that time off as soon as I possibly can. And, then I work my schedule around it, client consults and things, so that I can show up for my kids. And some of the ways that I remember as a child had an impact on me, like when my mom would show up. I, and then obviously career is big, a huge priority. So I try to make myself very accessible. I do have a lot of help and I do have a lot of household help and I'm not ashamed of it. And I do like to talk about it because it is how my life works. I have an au pair who's wonderful with my kids. My mom is wonderful. She picks my daughter up from preschool and plays with her for a couple hours in the afternoon. I have somebody, I have a housekeeper and I have somebody to help me with meal prep because those are things that I can easily delegate and allows me to really be present for my children when I'm with them. It allows me to really be present for my clients and my colleagues when they need me. And it allows me to have time and space for myself so that I can do all of those things. And I think as much as work-life balance is a thing, I do think I have it, but I don't know that on any particular day I feel particularly balanced. I think I just kind of look at the month or the week and over time try to make sure that I prioritize the important things for all domains of my life.
Well,
Yeah,
you're doing a wonderful job professionally juggling all that you have going on. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. Tying that into what you're asking about with mentorship and networking and community, with the American Association for Settlement Consultants, I think we've built a really, really nice community of settlement planners. And really, for the first time in the industry, I felt that I have people where I really can call and ask for a question or, if something comes up in a case and what would you do in this situation or how would you best help the client? Now I feel like I have a huge network of settlement consultants across the country who I can call on and ask these questions. And we're not competitors and we're not trying to get commission sharing agreements for one another or have anything from one another. We're just literally trying to help and make sure that none of us are reinventing the wheel so that things are easier for all of us and better for our clients. And I really do think now having that sort of infrastructure is helping me. It's really nice just having that because a lot of us in this business are independent. But it's so great to have people to turn to when you can't reinvent the wheel. You don't have time to reinvent the wheel. And you just want to be better. So.
Yeah. It's nice that, the community gets together, they share their ideas. You're helping injured workers and you want to be able to, provide the best outcomes for, those individuals. I also love that you followed your passion as a structured consultant and helping those, injured individuals. And as you mentioned, you work with several different parties. You mentioned working with, trust companies. If you could do this, if you can walk us through some success stories where you're working with injured workers that maybe they were on Social Security disability, or maybe they're on Medicaid, and how you were able to bring those resources together and make an informed decision, for that injured worker in order to move forward with the settlement.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And in the workers' compensation arena, it's obviously there's a lot that goes into a workers' compensation settlement. Like you said, there's the medical aspect, there's the indemnity aspect. We have to look at government benefits. So I always start off on a case like that with talking to the lawyer, finding out what benefits the person's on. If there's already a set aside, I look at the set aside. I will ask the attorney if they've looked into non-Medicare covered allocations to make sure that that is part of the settlement. And I think a lot of attorneys overlook that. And again, find out what government benefits the client's on. Sometimes it's all. Sometimes it's SSI, SSDI, Medicare, Medicaid. Sometimes it's just a few. But I think that I do know last year, for example, I worked on a case and it was a 1994 injury. So this case had been open almost 30 years, and the woman was terrified. She was on Medicare, Medicaid, with a home waiver. So she was getting home health services. She also was on SSDI and SSI. And she didn't understand her set aside, and most claimants don't. And a lot of the workers' compensation attorneys don't really understand how to explain that aspect to the client.
Right.
And so I like to meet the client, find out what they're on, find out what they want, find out what they're afraid of. When it comes to settling a workers' comp case, I find out what their motives would be in settling the comp case. And then we start to sort of run the numbers, and I'll bring on the partners who we need to bring on to answer the questions for the clients. So with this particular case, I knew what sort of income this woman needed. And of course, there weren't necessarily enough dollars to get her what she wanted, but we looked at her SSDI. We played with the numbers enough. We tried to figure out sort of what budget would at least work for her. And because she desperately wanted to be off of the workers' comp system. And I think she wasn't getting paid at the time. And, there's all these different variables. So we went and we came up with we tried to get her benefits as close to her workers' comp indemnity checks as we could. We made sure that we protected her SSI and SSDI. So we set up a special needs trust. We had a Medicare set aside. The Medicare set aside is being professionally administered. It's being professionally administered within the special needs trust. So by showing her that we were able to basically keep her income, we'd be able to keep her checks coming in like she had when she was on workers' comp, and know that her medical needs would continue to be cared for or taken care of going forward. And she would no longer have to worry about being under surveillance or having the workers' compensation carrier decide on her treatment, and being sort of a prisoner to the system. She was very excited to be out and get that case settled. And the attorney was very happy to get a 1994 case off of her books. So that was one of those cases.
Yeah, it must be difficult. I mean, that case pretty much had everything involved with it. SSDI, SSI. And there must be, a fear from the injured worker, that they might lose their rights to some of these benefits. So, taking those complex situations and breaking it down, into something that's easy that they can understand must be challenging.
It is. I think doing the settlement consulting on med mal cases and liability cases, it's hard still, even when you have to explain the structure and the trust, because that is a lot to explain. And there's certain drawings that I do and visuals that I do to try to help the clients understand. But then I think workers' comp does add that whole other element of complexity. And I try to just be really, really, really patient with whomever I'm working with. And I try to break it down too with the clients. I'm like, let's talk about, first, we're going to talk about your indemnity. We're going to talk about your income, your monthly needs. What do you need in order to survive going forward? And then we go over and we look at the medical. And then, I'll let the attorney know if I think that there's anything they should be asking for, additional that they haven't asked for. But it is hard. And as you all know at Amitros, unfortunately, too, a lot of our injured workers and the people who are most severely injured are also they're on heavy medications, and they're depressed and they're anxious, and that does slow down the cognitive process a little bit. They can be really smart people, but just all those processes plus the chronic pain does make things even harder. It adds an extra layer of challenge. And so I think just understanding that and knowing that I will have to be extremely patient with them and take time and break things down and maybe pace it and say, today our first meeting is going to just be about your indemnity. And then let's have another meeting in a couple of days where we, go over any of those questions. And now we talk about medical.
Right.
And so sometimes I think with the comp cases, it's definitely a multi-step approach.
So when you're having the discussions with the injured worker, potentially family members, their attorneys, what type of information are you collecting, where you have, monies that are going to be set aside in the future? And then, what are these monies targeted for? Can you kind of talk through some examples there?
Sure. So I think, at least as far as the indemnity, my planning is somewhat similar to what it would be in the liability arena, but I always ask the clients first, what are your housing needs? What's your housing situation? Because obviously having stable housing and transportation are very basic needs that a lot of our injured workers don't have. So we start talking about that and how much money do we have and what's the best housing situation and how can we put you in the best situation given what you're going to get. And we ask if there's other sources of income in the family, what they need to, what do they need now? And if there is, if there's going to be some sort of offset, do we want to maybe have monthly payments higher at the beginning from the structure? And then, maybe they can be a little bit lower on the back end when their Social Security retirement kicks in. Right. Asking about whether they have children or spouses, all that comes into play. And I think talking about families is also really important when we're doing this, especially in the workers' comp context, because often I think the challenge is that the carriers aren't necessarily providing the full value of the case. It's a settlement as far as, perm total and the benefits that they would be entitled to. And it's a compromise. But at the same time, we know that if the injured worker passes away while the case is still open, then their family is going to be in bad shape. Or at least I don't know if that's in every jurisdiction, but at least we're in practice. Once they pass away, the claim pretty much goes away. So I think talking about all those things, it's important, and to come up with the best solution for that person and their family. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes we do the whole analysis and realize that settling is just not going to work for them. And I obviously hate that because I want to get things settled, but I think it's also important to know when there's just not enough being offered and it's not going to end up working for the client.
Yeah. I mean, doing the numbers, providing the information, making sure that, your clients are making informed decisions, I'm sure is, very important to you as well as the clients. So in terms of your experiencing sitting down with, injured individuals, their attorneys, going through the settlement process. I mean, we have folks that, are on Medicare, as well as Medicaid. You might be working with individuals that might have been injured in a third-party liability or in workers' comp.
Mm.
What are the common concerns they have regarding Medicare and their compliance in respect to how they spend the money?
I think definitely in the workers' compensation context, the people who need a lot of services, or they really do need Medicare covered services, really want to protect their Medicare. They don't want to have to report. It is confusing for them. I I think I've always said this probably to Andrea, that selling Amitros professional administration services is really probably the easiest product for me to sell in the settlement space, because I do think, like I said, in the workers' compensation area, the injured workers don't know what's Medicare covered, what's not, how they can spend their dollars, and they can't afford to lose their Medicare coverage. And obviously, having the discounts that you guys provide helps with that as well, helps stretch those dollars a little bit more. And I think you all help demystify for the injured worker what things will look like on the other side of settlement. But I think, and I think the conversation's a little bit different in the liability side, because things are still a little bit, the regulations still are not as clear. So I do find, honestly, in the liability space, not a ton of people want to have professional administration. They just want to have a separate bank account, sort of as a backup policy. But I think in the workers' compensation space, for sure. But I have had some really big liability cases with organ transplants and things like that, where people are on Medicare, and where these are huge settlements, and where I think we would all suspect that if Medicare did really start enforcing, their rules,
Right.
For future treatment, that these are people who would be at the greatest risk. And in those cases, definitely professional administration. The clients have wanted it, the attorneys have wanted it. But again, I think showing everyone their options is paramount. I don't think, as a settlement consultant, it's fair to leave any stone unturned. And it's not my decision at the end of the day. It's not the attorney's decision at the end of the day. It's the client's decision. And if they're well informed, then, they might not make a decision that I would make or their attorney would make, but at least if they know their options, then I've done my job.
Yeah. Being informed. I mean, it's a risk decision, especially in liability, where someone's already on Medicare. It could be a significant claim, catastrophic claim, and I mean, Medicare is aware, of those claims through Section 111 reporting, and as you indicated, there's no regulations on point yet for liability. However, it's been in discussions over the years, so. Each party is going to decide how they're going to consider Medicare's interest going forward. Getting back to, the professional administration, it can be challenging. It can, be complex. You have situations where, you have catastrophic claims. It might be, a paraplegic, or, someone that had failed back surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting into those types of discussions in regards to, the administrative piece, talking about separate, a separate account, the actual conversations with the medical providers regarding, the billing? I mean, with MSAs, it could be, the state fee schedule, usual and customary. And what are you hearing from the injured workers and the attorneys regarding, the back end in terms of the administration piece?
I think people are happy with the administration. I don't think people necessarily understand it, but once they have it, they seem to be happy with how things go. I think a lot of people, for some reason, a lot of people have trouble distinguishing between the funding and the administration. So I have attorneys call me all the time where they have a hard time conceptualizing the structure funding, the structure funding in MSA versus professional administration versus self-administration. So I always explain to attorneys that you can have an MSA that is professionally administered and a lump sum. You can have it be a structure and self-administered. You can have a combination of the two. So I think that's something that just needs a pretty thorough explanation for people. I have a lot of people who think that they can only use exactly what is line itemed in the MSA, or they have to use the funds in the MSA exactly how it's spread out. And I always try to explain to them that as long as it's an injury, it's a Medicare covered treatment, it's related to the work injury, and there's funds to cover it, then they can use their MSA funds for it. Because the MSA, we know, is a snapshot in time, and the medication cost might change. Or, at this point, they're spending a lot of money on a spinal cord stimulator trial, but then that trial ends up failing and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars, but now they're on a very expensive pain medication. And so it makes sense for there to be that flexibility, but I think a lot of people don't understand that. They
Right.
think if my Medicare set aside says I need to have 24 physical therapy sessions and I can only have 10 epidural injections, that's all they're getting. And I think it's explaining to them that that's not there. This is a pot of money to use for these injuries and for injury related treatment.
Right. And I mean, conditions can worsen, if the doctor's indicating that, it's work related and otherwise covered by Medicare, then that's something that, we would pick up.
Right.
And, as a company, the settlement consultant, as well as administration, we help, the individuals prepare for life after settlement.
Mhm.
And we want to try and, help them as much as we can to ease that transition. I was hoping you could give us an example, of where you work with the Mitros and you help that individual through the settlement process. Maybe there were some obstacles in the way or issues, and how did you effectively resolve that case?
I think just thinking back to all of the cases where I've used Demetros, it is a situation where the client really does not understand what the MSA can be used for.
Mm.
And I tell them, but I'm not the one who's going to be doing the professional administration. And we know our injured workers, I think they have just been so bullied to some extent by the comp system. And maybe that's too harsh of a word, but they're getting their treatment controlled. They're not getting the care they need. And they need to understand in a big way that getting off of the comp system and getting their case settled is going to make a huge difference in their life. And it's a huge difference in their medical care. And so for those clients with very complex needs and, big medical projections and high medication needs, I get them on the phone with somebody from Amitros. I'll call somebody from Amitros and set up a conference call with a client and make sure that all their questions are answered, that they understand what life will look like after settlement. And I think by doing that, people feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of closing out their comp cases.
And I think, pointing out, independent medical evaluations, utilization reviews, pre-certs for surgeries. That's not something that you see after settlement. Again, if the doctor indicates that it's work-related, otherwise covered by Medicare, then we're going to step in and we're going to make the payment on it. And as you indicated, there's also savings too. The surgery might be $25,000, and with Amitros and with our provider networks, we could save significant money there. So we help preserve those funds so they last over the person's lifetime. Andrea, do you have additional questions here?
I don't think I have any additional questions. Joanna, is there anything that we didn't ask you that you wish we would have, or anything you'd like us to go over and have you share?
I think we were pretty comprehensive. As you both know, or at least Andrea knows, I could probably talk for days and never be quiet, but people hear me enough. So
Yeah, us sales ladies, we can talk forever. I hear that. Well, we really, really appreciate your time and you sharing a little bit about your personal life as well as your career journey and how you're advocating for the injured folks out there and bringing assistance to them. So I think it was amazing and I really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Demetrius, for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you guys more.
Thanks for listening to It's Settled, the Ametros podcast. Find us on major streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your review means a lot to us. It helps us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. For more information about Ametros, please visit our website at ametros.com. That's AMETROS.com.
And a big shout out to our amazing guests for sharing their experiences, and to our dedicated podcast producer, Melanie Samaran. Join us in our next episode for more uplifting stories. It's settled. On to the next time. Stay inspired and continue making positive impact.